All right. Dan, thanks for joining me today. Super excited to go over this. This is a hot topic that we've been talking about for quite some time and talking to a lot of businesses about. We are going to be going over the Windows 10 end of life. Um, and Give me one second here. All right. So now tell me a little bit, Dan. We know, I mean, here, I guess for the specifics are that Windows 10 end of support is October 14th, 2025. So this year, not many months away. What does that mean? What does that actually mean?
Well, I mean, it means you'll no longer be able to get security updates, patches for Windows 10 after that point. So mid-October this year.
Yeah. Okay. So what's I mean, Microsoft obviously has gone through different operating system iterations for, many years. What's the hype around Windows 11? Why move to Windows 11 or what's the aside from Windows 10 being end of support, I mean, is there any other big things to consider with Windows 11?
Well, I mean, I guess the biggest piece is around TPM and the security component of Windows 11 versus Windows 10, and that's kind of maybe what makes this a bigger upgrade for most than going from 8 to 10 was a few years ago, or 7 to 10, which a lot of businesses actually did, and skipped 8 overall. A lot of it is just because of the way that BitLocker works now and encryption keys work and Windows Hello works, and that's built into Windows 11, but it does require different hardware than what Windows 10 requires. And I think that's where a lot of the maybe negative feedback is in the transition from Windows 10 to 11.
Ah, so security is a big part of it. And what you're saying is that you can't just, hey, upgrade to Windows 11. That like there's some specific hardware requirements that necessitate maybe really evaluating what hardware you have and if it will even work with Windows 11.
Exactly. Yeah. Typically in the past, it's been you just had to worry about, is Windows to use Windows 7 to Windows 10 example, you had to worry about, do I have enough RAM? Do I have enough storage space? Do I have enough processing power so that this thing isn't just dog slow? Now we have to worry about the underlying chips on the board. Does the processor support moving to Windows 11? Does the TPM module, which specifically you need TPM 2.0 to move to Windows 11, does that support it? So it's just a lot more requirements versus in the past it's just been about, okay, do I have enough storage space? Do I have enough RAM? Are we okay there? And that's where a lot of this comes in, is the specific requirements around 11 are different than other upgrades in the past.
Okay, so that makes a lot of sense because what first comes to my mind is yeah, just add more RAM and we're rocking and rolling, right? But so we need to know a little bit more about this TPM 2.0. Can you elaborate on that a little bit more? Why, security, I got that, but is there a little bit more depth to it?
Yeah, I mean, the easiest way to look at it is secure storage for the keys. So by default, Windows 11 is going to be BitLockered, right? So the hard drive's encrypted. Pull the hard drive from that dead computer and it's encrypted. So theoretically, if it's your laptop's lost or stolen or whatever, the data on it is relatively safe outside of, state actors and the NSA can probably figure it out. But it's relatively safe. With If you don't have that TPM module, though, you'll be required to enter your BitLocker recovery key, which is 64 characters long. They do give it to you when you first enable BitLocker, like on Windows 10. Um, and it's this huge long key. And before the computer will even boot into the operating system, you're going to get a window that says enter your recovery key. And it's absolutely awful to have to do. Without TPM, you'll have to enter that key every single time that you try to boot an encrypted computer. And but with TPM, it has a module on the motherboard that stores that key, and it allows it to more or less enter it for you.
Okay.
But what it also does is it also kind of allows some tamper proofing. So if somebody was to take that hard drive out of the computer and boot it somewhere else, it's not going to decrypt. It's going to see that, hey, this device has been tampered with. Something's not right. This isn't tied to the serial number or whatever identifier it's going to use, and it allows you to kind of secure the device in a couple of different ways.
Okay, so that to me sounds a little bit technical, and it is, but I think the ultimate gist is that significantly more security, and it sounds like it's going to help with a lot of compliance and regulation too, as well, um, around the management of the data and the control of access. Uh, but but overall, so there's some real big security advantages, and that's also really why you have to look at your hardware and whether the hardware even has that capacity to have that, functionality, the TPM. Um, can you tell me a little bit more about how do we know if my computer is even compatible with Windows 11? I mean, because I think everybody's computers will pop up and say, "Hey, you need to upgrade to Windows 11." How do I know that my computer is even going to work with that?
There's a couple of ways. I mean, you could do it the old-fashioned way where you look up the specs on the computer and you look up the processor and you look up the motherboard and you determine it that way. But the easiest way is use the Windows 11 readiness check from Microsoft. It's just a little application that runs and it goes through and it checks for, does your machine support TPM 2.0? Do you have the storage space to do it? Do you have enough RAM to hit the requirements and the processor to hit the requirements? Honestly, that's the easiest way to do it, just because those requirements have changed, I think maybe 3 or 4 times, even over the last 8 months or so, as they've allowed lower and lower, or rather probably older and older processors. Because just because you have TPM doesn't mean you officially support Windows 11, right? They also have a processor spec now, within the last, few years typically, versus, something from 7 to 10 years ago, which may, depending on the motherboard, support TPM, but the processor may not support the same functions as well.
Okay. So what's the if they don't upgrade to Windows 11 and they just stick with Windows 10, what's the big deal? I mean,
Yeah.
what are they going to risk?
Well, you're not going to get Windows updates. I mean, that's at the end of the day, that's the biggest risk. So any CVEs that come out, any critical vulnerabilities, there's no guarantee that they're going to get addressed. So the other kicker is most antivirus won't support an end of life unpatchable OS either. So, Windows 7, when it went past its 3 years, the kind of the extended support SKU that Microsoft had for that, once it went past that, most major players in the antivirus space also stopped supporting it. So then you're not getting antivirus. You're running 3-year-old outdated hardware. I mean, it sounds like a recipe for disaster in business. Unfortunate, because obviously some businesses have to spend money to upgrade hardware that they didn't necessarily want to. But at the end of the day, we do have to protect the asset, and patching is the easiest way to limit your risk, your exposure.
So I know cybersecurity or hacking and malicious attacks around data and networks and things like that is out there quite a bit. I mean, but what's really the risk? I mean, for a couple months, I mean, are we talking, hey, we can fudge a couple months, or I mean, or obviously maybe not a couple of years. I mean, what's the criticality on that?
Well, I mean, it's going to depend, right, on the vulnerabilities that come out. Is, is it the absolute worst to not have it completed by October 15th? Probably not, but by November 15th, you're probably going to want to be well on your way. If you just look at what comes out every Patch Tuesday, or every week, every month that Microsoft patches it, there's critical vulnerabilities that are patched probably every 2 to 3 months that are actual critical or exploited vulnerabilities. So from a risk perspective, the first month you're probably okay. But once you've gone 30, 45 days past that, there's probably going to be your risk is going to consistently increase to the
Okay.
point where Microsoft probably even comes in, frankly, they almost always do this, but they'll probably come in and actually like do some critical patching towards the end of the year because they know people are gonna not upgrade. So yeah, your risk is day one, it's kind of pretty low, but by day 45 it starts getting pretty high. But
Mm,
then there's also another piece to it, which is the potentially your cybersecurity insurance.
mm.
They are not going to be happy if you're running an outdated, unpatched OS. That's not going to go over well if you have an incident. Sounds like a recipe for co-insurance at best, and at worst, a denial of a claim. And and it's kind of negligent. If you knew that this was end of life and can't be patched, but you didn't do anything about it, they're going to have their way with you.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. There's other business risk and liability, if financially, especially, and then if you're some sort of if you're in a regulated or industry, then it's even much worse because then you have a regulatory body that can hold you accountable to that, and if you're negligent or not up to date, then that can be a real problem. How is there any other what other kind of Windows 11 readiness steps or planning to help with a smooth transition would you recommend?
Well, I mean, there's a few current world issues that may make some of that tougher. Obviously, as you're trying, if you need to order computers, you need to consider the supply chain, right? And do and while for the most part, computers themselves are excluded from some of the tariffs, the reality is some of the parts in the computers may not be. And it seems at least lately, last few months, we've seen supply be really high and demand be really low, and then demand be really high and supply be really low. It's kind of just extremely volatile. So if you need to do a large order of workstations, you might want to get on that and also make sure that you do it when you can get good pricing versus overpaying. And then, it's not, it's at the end of the day, it's not that difficult of an upgrade for workstations that can just upgrade, right? So the ones that do support Windows TPM or TPM 2.0 and the ones that support Windows 11 already, you've run through the Microsoft Readiness Tool assessment. I actually think at the end of the assessment, you can actually just click install Windows 11 and it's going to run through and install the update. If you have Windows 10 Pro, it's going to go to 11 Pro. If you have Home, it's going to go to Home and it's going to kind of do that on its own once it's supported. So it's more or less a big Windows update that can be delivered through the same delivery channels versus, oh, I need to go buy this Windows 11 upgrade. Like you don't have to pay for the upgrade as long as you have a supported Windows 10 version and your device supports Windows 11, you can just install it.
Well, that's a big change too, because in the past you had to pay for the upgraded operating system, and so now you don't have to necessarily pay for it, but there's a lot of other logistics and things that
Yeah.
you got to consider. Potential. I mean, let's. I guess it depends on how many machines that might need to be replaced versus how many machines just need to be upgraded. It sounds like there's just a lot of logistical things to kind of work through and figure out for a business, an organization.
Yep.
Uh, I've got one more question for you that I can think of is what if, because we have a handful of clients that have specialized equipment, whether it's manufacturing, medical, or other things that's tied or proprietary, but it's tied to a Windows 10 operating system and computer that won't work with Windows 11. What recourse or what options do those type of businesses have?
So there are this has happened in the past, I think with the 7 to 10 upgrade. The 10 to 11 upgrade, they do have I don't know the SKU off the top of my head, but they do have an extended support SKU, which is going to effectively give you updates for Windows 10, but you'll have to pay for it. And I think it's kind of one of those tiered scale. Year one, it's X number of dollars. Year two, it doubles. Year three, it doubles, and I believe it's only going to go 3 years, but that's probably yet to be determined fully. So it's something like $75 or something along those lines for the first year, $150 for the second year, $300 for the third year. It does things a little bit differently. It'll tie it to Azure, so it has to be tied to an Azure tenant in a way, and it kind of runs through all that. So it's actually pretty complicated, and adds four or five, $450, $500 of paying for software for a computer you're going to have to replace in the next 2 to 3 years anyway.
Okay.
So it might give you a
But
little time, but it's definitely not going to be the end
okay.
solution for you.
Some of these folks that either that are governed by a regulatory body and have whether medical equipment or things like that, not necessarily need to panic. They can buy themselves some time, literally, and and then while they figure it out, or wait for the third party vendor to figure it out, because sometimes they don't have control over that. They're waiting on a third party vendor to update their software to make it compatible with Windows 11. Uh,
Usually, if something supports Windows 10, it's going to support Windows 11 from a in general standpoint. If the driver was written for 10, it'll probably most likely work for 11. It may not be certified for 11 yet, so that's something to keep in mind. But I think the majority of those use cases are probably devices. We really cannot be without this instrument or this computer that's attached to this instrument. And because if it works on 10, it's probably going to work on 11. But obviously you'd want to talk to the vendor, speak with the vendor, determine, what issues there are, and then test it. Now, if it's some specialized driver, who knows really, that only works on this one computer, and that computer doesn't support TPM 2.0, well, yeah, you might be stuck in that pay for support for the next, year or two until you decide to replace the machine and work with the vendor on a new deployment.
I think the other thing that would be that I see as a challenge really is that for you and I, this working through this and figuring this stuff out is pretty straightforward, pretty easy, right? But that's because we're in, day out. We work in the industry for other for other businesses that they're focused on their business, not necessarily on the IT side of things. It could be a little overwhelming, I think, and just kind of figuring what needs to be done, what needs to be upgraded, what needs to be replaced, and I typically, what I would suggest there, and I'll just put just a quick little plug. That's something that we can help out with too, right? If somebody needed some consulting services or help around that. But if they have an IT department or an IT company, that's typically something that they can go to those folks and help get that information and be proactive about planning ahead for this October. Uh, any other thoughts, Dan, as we wrap it up here? I mean, we just wanted to take a few minutes, kind of talk about the high level items. Is there anything that we're missing that we haven't touched on today?
Well, I think the other little piece is that it does affect home computers as well, just the same.
Mm.
I think while in general we focus on business and business risk, I mean, if your home computer can't be updated, I guess you don't have to worry about it rebooting randomly. I guess that's a positive, but outside of that, you still have a lot of risk at home, especially with kids that jump on machines or my cat gets on my computer at home sometimes and types buttons, and so who knows what they can click on. You can't
But
trust cats.
yeah, I was
You
gonna
really
say
can't
you have a
trust her.
special cat,
You
so
can't trust cats, and so it does affect home computers just the same, and so the same concept applies that if you aren't patching the machine, you are at a higher risk of clicking something, and instead of Windows just catching it by default, it affecting you personally or professionally. So
well, Dan, thanks for your time and thanks for kind of going through some of this stuff with us today. Any of our watchers, encourage you to like, subscribe, and appreciate you watching our call today. And we will wrap it up. Thank you, everybody.
thanks.